Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. We are back with yet another session of Tooth and Nail by Chris Bonnello. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, not bad, thanks. And welcome to what I will immediately say is the penultimate Tooth and Nail session.
I
Because
don't
we've
think
got
I'm ready for this. But let's start.
we've got 8 chapters left, except the last 5 can't really not be read together.
Oh,
So 3 today, 5 in December. Let's hope we have a session in December because 2 months would be a hell of a long time to wait. But
that's true.
yeah, if assuming that we do have a December session, then this will be done by the end of the year.
Amazing. So we'll be starting with a new book next year.
Yeah.
That's great. This is going to be a fun, I think, an emotional ride rather than a fun ride. Let's see.
Yeah, the moment you said the word fun, I thought, are you going to change your mind about that? And you did.
Yeah.
But it'll be a type of fun.
Mhm.
This chapter just coming up is one of my favourites in the book. And then, well, I'm not saying anything about the 2 chapters after that, but I will say with some degree of certainty that 3 is the right number of chapters for tonight.
Perfect. Let's start.
Okay, so a bit of a recap. Let's think about where everyone is. So, Ewan and Alex last month went to the I've forgotten the name of it, the octagonal room where they managed to kill 5 clones without a single gunshot being fired. Central Research Headquarters. That's it. And after a nice, satisfying argument with Marshall over the phone, they split up. Alex is wandering around trying to find a path upwards towards floor B. Ewan found the experiment chamber, burned it to the ground, and believes he killed Oliver Roth, even though, no, he didn't. Meanwhile, Kate and McCormick have been climbing up somewhere else in the Citadel, and Kate has shot one of the border points with a sniper to basically buy themselves some more time, because the original threat was, they've only got half an hour to destroy everything, but no, Kate's basically bought them some more time by temporarily breaking the force field. She and McCormick had to split up, and McCormick, last time we heard, had successfully burned down the paper archive. So they've only got 2 targets left. One of them is the backup servers in what is called the high priority functional cluster. More about that later. And the other one is Marshall's computer on floor B. And it's going to be a bit of a challenge to literally break into the guy's office that high in the fortress, but we'll see how they do.
So,
and meanwhile, the other underdogs are still, there's Shannon and Lorraine in the comms unit with Mark guarding them outside, and the others are still in Spitfire's Rise Mark II, this fairly depressing, undeveloped shelter house that Jack managed to find, and none of them are happy with. And I think that's it. The reason why they went to that house is because they don't know whether Alex's clones know where Spitfire's Rise is or not. And frankly, they can't afford to take the risk. Anyway, so back to the outer city of New London, chapter 21.
Let's go.
Alex was struggling to navigate along his improvised route, thanks to too many clone platoons blocking his original path. Lorraine and Shannon had done their best to redirect him, but with limited success. Thankfully, there was something familiar about the path he was on. Nothing about Floor F had been familiar, despite him having been there before. There was a gap in his memory, just like everything that had happened between being trapped in the clone factory control room and resurfacing in a bungalow somewhere. Nonetheless, something was familiar about the corridor he jogged down. Yeah, that's basically Alex's own personal journey throughout Tooth and Nail. He's trying to rediscover his memories and work out why they're missing and what it is that he's missing.
Mm-hmm.
There was something familiar about the corridor he jogged down. It didn't take him long to work out what it was. The clone factory control room was dead ahead. Alex's common sense conflicted with his instincts. One told him to investigate, to gain clues about the gaps in his memory. The other told him to get the hell away from there. He went inside. His decision was helped by Kate's assurance that time was no longer a factor. That, and he would probably never get another opportunity to revisit the place where his memory ended. The door was unlocked. There would be no reason to secure a door to a disused room. The Alpha control room was similar to how Alex remembered, as much as he could remember it. The layout of the control panels and diagonally downward windows all matched the picture in his head. The view past the windows, however, was entirely different. The clone factory, destroyed at the end of Book 1, obviously, was a metallic wasteland. Steel and glass lined the floors, with raised pads that had once been bases of the clone pods dotted approximately across the factory floor. Chemical pipes that had been ripped apart still lay in place like gutted snakes. The monorail carriage stood at the station, charred and useless. But most striking of all was the silence. Even behind the glass, the constant hums and hubbub of the factory floor had made it to Alex's ears. It had been replaced with deathly silence. Alex became aware of a feeling that had subtly entered his head without his permission. It was loss, anger, and panic rolled into one, and the image of Dean Ginelli lay under it all. Dad? Why am I thinking of Dad? Alex was no stranger to negative feelings about his father, but why they nagged him so strongly in New London's clone factory he had no idea. However, the papers in his left hand would give him some clues. Alex had almost forgotten about the report from the Central Research Headquarters. Oh yeah, while he and Ewan were in there, he just decided to print off those files just to browse them when he had some spare time, while the room was also full of clones that were eventually going to try killing them. The 9:30 deadline was so firm in his mind that reading it had been an impossibility. He sat down in one of the swivel chairs, kept one hand on his assault rifle, and started to read. Executive Summary Report, the Ginelli Project. Oh yeah, we've seen the title in a couple of places in the book, but not actually heard anything about it. Executive Summary Reports, the Ginelli Project. Last updated May 18th, Year 1. They were working on this yesterday, thought Alex. This document provides information relating to the following. The cloning of insurgent Alex Ginelli from terrorist faction 001, otherwise known as the Underdogs. Events concerning the deal made between Alex Ginelli and New London Complex staff on April 25th. I think that was the last day of Underdogs 1. Cross-references to the early experimental stages of acceleration, see separate reports, and yes, book 3 in the series is called Acceleration. Subsequent attempts to locate the insurgents' base of operations, referred to by Ginelli as Spitfire's Rise. By the end of the opening paragraph, Alex was so engrossed that he had forgotten he was in the midst of a battlefield. Deal? What kind of deal did I make? And why don't I remember it? What will I tell the others once I find out what I did? A song tried to enter Alex's head, but he managed to keep it out. Wait, what was that all about? He read on, his heart thumping against his chest as if trying to make him stop. On April 25th, Year 1, an intrusion was made by 5 members of terrorist faction 001. Alex Ginelli, Ewan West, Kate Arrowsmith, Jack Hopper, and Charlie Coleman, brackets deceased. Ginelli was separated from his group and trapped inside the clone factory Alpha control room, and the decision was made to involve Dr. Gwen Crossland, brackets psychiatrist/experimental hypnotherapist. There's a whisper in Alex's memory about a woman called Gwen, but no more. However, the mention of experimental hypnotherapy frightened him. Dr. Crossland's previous interactions with insurgents had yielded no positive results, despite her unparalleled expertise. Her previous test case, Daniel Amopoulos, brackets deceased, the person who got captured before the start of Book 1, so hence why they know everyone's names in the Underdogs, was unable to offer details about Dr. Joseph McCormick, or Spitfire's Rise, due to his own lack of knowledge. He also did not consent to the cloning process before his death. What, and I did? In contrast, Ginelli's resilience was soon worn down, and he was amenable to a deal whereby he would provide a new clone model and information about his group's whereabouts in exchange for his own safety. Alex's stomach started to disagree with him. Nothing in these words sounded like the person he believed himself to be. The real Alex Ginelli would last longer than Daniel, surely. Why did he volunteer himself to be cloned? How was his resilience worn down? And how could he give away the location of Spitfire's Rise without knowing it himself? None of it made sense. Grant staff would not offer him a survival deal and actually keep him alive at the end of it. And Alex was smart enough to know that, so he would never have accepted such a deal. A song tried to enter his head again, and he dismissed it. He scanned through the document to get to the parts where he was manipulated. Dr. Crossland was instructed to use her experimental two-track mind therapy to create two different memory streams, one where Ginelli would remember the entirety of his experience with us, and one where he would remember none of it. Ginelli would be forcefully switched between each memory stream depending on our purposes. Dr. Crossland was able to glean Alex's vulnerabilities using data from his old social media accounts. 2 songs were chosen as triggers to switch Alex Ginelli between his typical state of ignorance and his state of full awareness. His full memory would be switched on and off respectively by 1. Smoke on the Water, Deep Purple, 1972, and 2. Barbie Girl, Aqua, 1997. Barbie Girl? Seriously?
That's an interesting choice.
Yeah. It made sense. Just 2 lines of that song made him want to shut down his whole brain, and he had probably told that to Facebook at some point. But he had found out how to get his memory back. Smoke on the Water. It was the same song he had spent the last few minutes trying to keep out of his head. He had known his brain was fighting it, but not consciously realised what it was doing. In the same way that he had known about his memory gap for 3 weeks, but his brain had avoided thinking about it, so he had never realised. All he needed to do to switch his memory back on was sing Smoke on the Water. The prospect terrified him. It crossed his mind that he might prefer to live in ignorance rather than learn what he had done. But the situation was bigger than him. His friends would suffer if he didn't do this. They may have already suffered because of me. But screw it, let's see what happens. And yeah, literally just say in the book. The great thing is, if you have to print lyrics, then there's a whole copyright related thing and lots of money has to be spent. But if you just write then, well, that's not lyrics, so it's fine.
It is. It's very different than usual, and it helps.
That's all right.
With the whole vibe. So that's great.
To an outsider, the scene would have looked ridiculous. A grown man sat on a swivel chair in an abandoned room above a burned-out clone factory, singing to himself whilst reading and balancing an assault rifle on his lap. But as the song entered his head, a sleeping part of Alex Ginelli woke up. He was met with the greatest headache of his whole life, as if he had absorbed an entire encyclopedia in less than a second, and his brain switched over to his other memory stream. Okay, new paragraph, and just to clarify, this is a flashback to book 1. Kate had better get out, he had thought to himself as he had clutched his sticky shoulder wound. Otherwise, I got trapped in here for nothing. He had not known what had become of Ewan and Charlie. Ewan had aborted the mission and told them to return to Floor Z, where Jack was guarding the exit. A miniature army of clones had surrounded the door of the Alpha control room, and his only weapons had been rifles from the control room's dead clones and their limited ammunition. But 20 minutes had passed, and the army outside had done nothing but wait. Alex had worked out that his fate would be similar to Daniel's. If they wanted him dead immediately, they could have invaded and shot him. The phone mounted to the wall had rung, and Alex had swallowed his fear and answered. Smoke on the Water had been the first sound he had heard, and then a soft, soothing voice spoke over it. Alex Ginelli, she had said, my name is Gwen Crossland. Listen very carefully. Your life depends on what you do next. Tell Grant no deal, Alex had answered. Ever. Another paragraph break, new scene. The clone factory had been so much louder on the inside, and bigger too. From the Alpha control room, still visible to Alex somewhere in the distance, it had looked enormous. From the factory floor, it looked unending. Are you ready for this, Alex? The soft voice of Gwen Crossland had said. Alex had looked sideways at Crossland, a 4-foot-something grey-haired old hag with a wicked smile and the demeanour of a nearly retired headmistress. She was forceful without being loud, although the 100 clones behind her had helped. You won't remember it, she said, almost whispering. You won't even remember consenting to the deal. Consent, Alex had thought. Consent doesn't count if it's forced. Why the hell did I even say yes? It had been the pain, of course. Crossland had barked at him down the phone while the large clone model stamped on his shoulder wound, accurate and devastating like a surgeon with a hammer. Crossland's idea had been simple. Keep up the pain until he either agreed to the deal or died from his wounds. Unfortunately, the wound had not been deadly, so death would have taken hours. The word yes would be instantaneous, and he always had the option later of running away and getting himself shot to death nice and quickly. He had not taken that option. The cloning pod was dead ahead. Will my clones remember what I did? He had asked. Crossland had given a sweet smile. We grow our clones without their models' memories. So they're not perfect copies after all. Oh, don't get me wrong, we have the technology. just like we could give them vocal cords if we wanted. But Grant and Pierce agree it would be a bad idea. The closer a clone becomes to a human, the more tempted we'd be to treat it as such. Besides, the memory transfer process would take a whole week of open cranial brain analysis. The model would have to die first, and we'd rather it didn't come to that. Plan A requires you to stay alive, even if Plan B does not. My clones won't know who I am, where I've been, what I've agreed to, or where I live. Now, Crossland continued, it may have occurred to you to make a run for it rather than fulfill your end of the deal, but bear in mind we have no reason to kill you once you're done. As a matter of fact, we need you to escape New London so your friends know you're unharmed. How very kind of you. Crossland had laughed. If you spend several days in the outer city walls, it will be obvious that something happened to you here. If your friends think you're dead and you later turn up alive, it'll be suspicious. Your escape to the countryside will be a nice, peaceful way of keeping your friends' anxiety at bay without affecting our deal. Now, off you pop. Alex had given her a dirty look and recognised his own powerlessness. There would be a chance to win, but it would not be then. Not that day. He had stepped into the cloning pod, and the door had sealed shut behind him. New paragraph. He had been held against his will in a bungalow for 2 days, although most of the time he had not been aware of being imprisoned. In his regular state, the one in which he knew nothing about his capture, he had refused to leave the bungalow. He had believed himself to be acting on his own free will, staying in place like the loyal teammate he was, until the teenagers found their chance to escape. Each time he entered his fully aware state, he realised it was Crossland's doing. Conditional thought, she had called it. Every thought that passed his mind about leaving the bungalow had been met with an instruction that had been planted there. I will stay here until the teenagers need me. The teenagers must have been dead, of course, but Crossland's work would force him to stay put. It's been torture without a torture chamber, a prison where the prisoner believed he was choosing to stay. 48 hours after his imprisonment, smoke on the water sounded yet again. It had been speakers fixed to the top of the approaching vehicle as normal. The memories had come flooding back to Alex, the memories of what he was really doing at the bungalow. Crossland had strolled across the front door as if she lived there, flanked by 2 clones on each side, and greeted Alex like a rebellious teenage son. I have a treat for you today, she had said, producing a 12-inch laptop from a pink and purple pouch. A video of my clone children growing up? No, she had answered. You are the child in this scenario. When was the last time you spoke to your father? His birthday, Alex thought, 6 months before takeover day. The population of New Brighton has been declining for a while, Crossland had said. Some kind of disease did most of the work. Among the survivors, your father was easy to find. You're using my dad as leverage against me. That's the sad thing, Crossland had said in a voice of genuine pity. We can't do any physical harm to you. Otherwise, when you revert to your ignorant state, you'll wonder where the cuts and bruises came from. We even had to give you the telescopic handgun you dropped in the corridor, simply because you would have taken it if you'd escaped independently. So we'll have to use a different means of extracting information. She had sat down at the dining room table, beckoning Alex to follow. There, she had powered up her miniature laptop. Your father is up to speed on the situation, so don't worry about explaining. He knows I'm fighting against Nicholas Grant. That's something, at least. And suddenly, Dean Gianelli was on the screen. Alex had felt his inside shrink, as if he were a small child in front of his taekwondo instructor once again. Alex, his father had said. Hi, Dad. No more words had been spoken. The video background had been a blank wall. There were no clues about where in New London he was being held. Not that it would have mattered. New Brighton he was being held. Not that it would have mattered. Gwen Crossland had stood up, invited Alex into the chair, and towered over him as high as her short body was able to. Your friend Daniel couldn't tell us anything useful, but maybe you can. Tell us the location of Spitfire's rise, or your father gets shot in the head. You have 1 minute. This exact scenario had occurred to Alex. It was their most obvious move. But 2 days in the bungalow had given him almost zero time to think of ideas, as he had spent most of it unaware his father was even in danger. As far as he could remember, this was only the 3rd time they had woken him up. Don't you dare, Alex, his father had said. My decision, Dad, not yours, Alex had replied, just for the power trip. 50 seconds, Crossland had said. Alex had stayed silent. It was interesting watching his father's determination for Alex not to give in. He had seemed to want life and death at the same time. 20 seconds. The New Brighton clone, out of shot, had cocked his gun, and the barrel came into view, pointing at the side of Dean's head. The power is all mine now, thought Alex. Everything that happens is my decision, not his. In another world, this might have been rewarding. 10. What if I saved him and didn't betray my friends? 9. I could lie. Why does nobody think of that in interrogations? 8. If I lie and get away with it, they'll either keep him alive or shoot him, depending on what they were planning to do all along. 7. Of course, one day they'll learn I was lying and kill him anyway. 6. But even then, better that than losing the war. 5. Screw it, let's do this. 4. Stop! Alex had yelled, to the horror and relief of his father. Crossland closed her mouth and smiled. Lemsford, Alex had said, remembering Matthew's room and the dinosaur bed sheets. Spitfire's rises in Lemsford, but you don't have to kill them, just make them surrender. Lemsford, in case that sounds familiar, is also that village where Jack and Gracie fought those 3 Alex clones.
Oh.
And the place where they sheltered in like chapter 5 of book 1. So,
it sounds familiar.
House? Yeah. Which house in Lemsford? I don't know, School Lane or something, I think. We never need to remember road names. Gwen Crossland had given him a pat on the back and said no more. Hey, woman. Dean Janelli's voice had power, even from the other side of a small laptop screen. Crossland had given him her attention. You don't need to use me as leverage anymore, Alex's father had said with a crestfallen voice. I no longer consider him my son. Before Alex could respond, Crossland had powered down the laptop. Thank you, Alex, she had finished. We will keep your father in a safe place until we have visited Lemsford and determined whether your answer was accurate. If it was not accurate, then my father is dead, I know. That too. But we'll also initiate Plan B. We'll take you back to New London and open your skull and spend the next week transferring your memories to a new clone model. There's no guarantee they will lead us accurately to Spitfire's rise, of course. Science offers no guarantees about anything, hence why we tried the living method first. But it's more likely to work than listening to more lies. Good day, Alex. Within 2 minutes, she and her clone entourage had left the house and driven away with Barbie Girl blasting out of the speakers. Yeah, that was a sentence I never predicted I'd write in a novel. Then Alex had gone back to his dutiful, clueless self, guarding the bungalow and waiting for his friends to escape New London. And back to the present. Back in the disused Alpha control room, Alex staggered to his feet, lay a hand against the diagonal windows, and suppressed the contents of his stomach as they threatened to rise. The memory blast had provided the physical pain, and the betrayal of his father had provided the emotional pain. He checked his watch. It had felt like several days had passed, but it wasn't yet 10 o'clock. There'll be plenty of time before Grant replaced the border point and booted up the AME shield. Guys, came Ewan's voice from the radio. I'm on floor E. I found a stairwell. Anyone need directions? Not yet, said Kate. Yeah, said Alex. Ewan told him the route, but he only paid as much attention as he had to. Once he had memorized the directions, he skipped to the end of the report in his hands. Before moving forward with the night's mission, he had to find out what had happened. Alex Janelli was able to leave his designated post upon the escape of his allies, rendering Crossland's backup plan of memory transfer unworkable. In the aftermath of the destruction of New London's clone factory, the inspection of Lemsford was delayed until staffing issues had been resolved. A failed trap at Oakenfold Special School forced an end to this delay, and on 17th of May, Year 1, a scouting team of Janelli clones reached Lemsford and searched for the insurgents' headquarters. They found Jack and Gracie. They were killed during their search of School Lane, and therefore a larger force was dispatched later that night. The village of Lemsford has since been searched with the most intrusive methods available and subsequently destroyed through a series of airstrikes. Yeah, I've actually visited Lemsford, and I drove through it feeling a little bit guilty about the fact that I destroyed it in a book. And subsequently destroyed through a series of airstrikes. The search found no evidence supporting Alex Janelli's claim. Therefore, at the conclusion of the search, Dean Janelli was executed in New Brighton Citadel. Alex did not know how to react. The text in the documents didn't make it seem real, but he believed it. His father had died 2 days ago, and he hadn't had any idea. It wouldn't have been such a bad thought. Most of the underdogs would have lost relatives by now without knowing, but he had caused his father's death and not even realised. Alex and his father had not been on good terms since his teenage years, but in different circumstances, Alex would have fought like hell to protect him. Perhaps Dad would have fought for him too. There was only one silver lining, and Alex clung onto it as if it justified him betraying his father. He picked out his phone and called comms. It was Shannon who answered. Hello? Shannon, it's Alex. You okay? I'm alive and uninjured. Tell me, Have the others found a new shelter? They had Jack leading them. He found a good place before the night was even over. Tell Mark to fetch them home. We can return to Spitfire's Rise. Grant doesn't have a clue where we live. There was a moment of quiet as Shannon tried to process the information. In the background, Lorraine mumbled something about proof. Are you sure, Alex? I mean, absolutely certain. A tear fell from Alex's eyes as he decided it was better to tell them the truth. He did well to spill all the details in his 3-minute time limit, especially in his emotional state. There were only 2 details he missed out: the names of the 2 songs that changed his memory state, and any mention of his father. Shannon and Lorraine were compassionate and understanding, although Alex wondered whether that would remain the case once he came home. The conversation ended, and Alex removed the battery from his phone. All the relevant information had been shared with those who needed to know. There was no need for him to keep the memories himself. He left the Alpha control room, abandoning the papers to avoid tempting himself to go down the same route again. Once the clone factory was no longer visible, he started to sing Barbie Girl, the only time in his life he had done so voluntarily, and wiped away all memory of his father's death. At least I'll still believe I have someone to fight for, came his last thoughts before it all faded. Then Alex blinked and looked around the corridor. Where the hell was he going again? Ewan, he said into the radio. What's the latest? Still on floor E waiting for you, Ewan replied. Are you at the stairwell yet? No, where is it? You can't remember? I told you about a minute ago. Sorry, said Alex, nursing his head, which ached for some reason. I must have zoned out. End of chapter 21.
Barbie Girl.
Yep.
That has an important, it's an important thing.
Yeah, it's a long chapter and it pauses the action of the showdown, but frankly, it is one of my favourites.
Oh, it has a lot of emotions involved with the father relationship, everything.
And the fact that at the end of it, he's just like, "Oh yeah, back into battle now." With actually no memory of of what he's remembered.
I don't know how I feel about that if I was in his place.
Alex gets a lot of that in this series. A bunch of situations which I'd like to hope make the reader think, what would you do in this situation? And frankly, the answer is, I don't know.
No, honestly, I wouldn't know what to do. I don't think I would be brave enough to delete all those memories or even go through all of this in the first place. But something.
Okay, are you ready for chapter 22?
I am, yes.
I'm not sure you are, but let's read it.
Oh.
Right. McCormick knew how much depended on him. If he failed to destroy the data servers, then the others could reach floor B, destroy Marshall's computer, stop the shield from going up, and still lose the war. Ewan and Alex may have deleted the data in the central research headquarters, but if the backups lived through the night, then Grant would have everything he needed to just build another shield. Unfortunately, the data servers were located in the most dangerous spot on floor P. McCormick found himself wishing he still had the body of a teenager, at the very least that he had not come to the HPFC alone. As vast as New London's outer city was, the upper floors couldn't hold every room that mattered. According to the maps they kept at comms, Floor A was reserved for the residential quarters of high-ranking staff. Floors B to D were where missions were planned and executed from, and floors E to G contained scientific and military research and development. There were a load of rooms essential to running an empire that could not fit at the top, so a full square mile of Floor P had been built, guarded, and reinforced as a high-security complex. The high-priority functional cluster had one entrance, and McCormick was just around the corner. In his way stood a thin, empty pathway, devoid of doorways, side corridors, upward pipes, or shelter points of any kind. 3 clone guards stood on the outside of the cluster, with 3 more on the inside. The 2 groups separated by a titanium door that would only open for those with the correct fingerprints, retinas, and 8-figure passcodes. Beyond that, if their maps were to be believed, lay a maze of silver corridors, twisted and claustrophobic enough to make a carrier pigeon reach for its compass. If Theseus had been trapped in this labyrinth, the Minotaur would have won. But he didn't have Shannon and Lorraine navigating for him. I'm almost there, he whispered into his phone. It was an audio call rather than a video call, of course. The fewer visual distractions he had, the safer he would be. Take me through the directions one more time. Once you're inside, answered Lorraine, you'll reach a crossroads fairly quickly. Take the right-hand corridor, go past the nutrition farm, and follow a curve around when you reach the special weapons storage facility, which should take you left. And how can I tell which rooms are the nutrition farm or the special weapons place? Well, either way, once you've taken the curve to the left, you keep going. Moments away from storming a one-floor fortress, McCormick came to realize the damage he had inflicted on Lorraine Shepherd. She was exhausted, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and almost all of it had been his own fault. He had been too demanding of her, and her limits were finally beginning to show. Don't forget, she literally operated on him back in Chapter 3 so he could go on this mission. McCormick heard the sound of hands against Lorraine's phone, and after a moment of quiet, Shannon started to talk. McCormick, she began, walk to the crossroads and turn right. When the path curves to the left, follow it to the next crossroads and go right again. Then left, left again, and it's the second door on the right. Did you get that? Fairly sure. Then say it back to me, now before you forget. McCormick smiled. Shannon's fiery nature had given her an uncompromising personality too. But even though this war was more personal to her than anyone else in the Underdogs, she was uncompromising in a productive way rather than a vengeful way. Right at the crossroads, McCormick answered, round the curve and right at the second crossroads. Then left, left, and second door on the right. Correct. If you find yourself at the central power generator, you've gone a door too far. Nicholas Grant had put lots of his golden eggs in one basket. His main power source, his army's food supply, his armory for advanced weapons, and the backup for all his data, all within a square mile. It spoke volumes about Grant's faith in the security of the HBFC. Thanks, Shannon. I'll let you know if I get out. If you get out, asked Shannon. Lorraine seized the phone. If you get out, she yelled. You're doing this alone? I'm the only one close by, and the other three are fighting their way to Marshall's office. It's the only strategy we have. You won't even get past the entrance on your own. And how do you plan to get out again? McCormick had out his dental mirror around the corner with trembling fingers and took a long sigh. Getting out's not an essential part of the plan. You know that. Like Oliver Roth, safety is just bonus points. Don't you dare. Lorraine, this is why the plan will work. When Grant designed this place, he assumed it will be attacked by people who plan to get out. And I hope I get out. But I know where my priorities lie. Joseph, promise me. In the dental mirror, McCormick saw a flash of green light and the guard's head turning. Something had unlocked the titanium door, and his time had come. With no time to lose on politeness, he hung up his phone and raised his assault rifle. If Barbara could see him now, she would not recognize him. She would look at him with terrified eyes and see another person. But that was okay, in the grand scheme of things. Or perhaps not okay, just necessary. The titanium door slid open, and McCormick leapt around the corner. His first spray of bullets killed the two outdoor guards, injured the third in his shoulder, and caught the clone in the doorway straight in the forehead. Dr. Joseph McCormick, the oldest and frailest soldier in Great Britain, had forced a breach point in the high-priority functional cluster. The third guard had no time to inspect his shoulder wound before McCormick's second spray killed him too. The three inside guards were busy pulling the jammed bodies out from the entrance in an attempt to lock McCormick out, so there was plenty of time for the man to begin his charge. He sprinted at a speed far too unhealthy for a man his age, and found himself 5 meters away when the bodies were cleared. He did not have much time. McCormick knew he would not have the strength to keep a sliding door open against the pull of 6 hands, so he had to find another blockage. He slammed his body against the entrance, clutched the hair of the Asian clone on the other side, and dragged his head into the hallway. The other 2 clones hauled the door closed anyway, snapping the bones in their colleague's neck. The door rebounded open, far enough for McCormick to reach through the gap with his assault rifle and finish off the final 2 guards. 7 young clone soldiers wiped out by a man nearly old enough for a free bus pass. It pays to be far too ambitious. McCormick stumbled over the bodies and began his jog. There was panic in the HPFC now, among soldiers who could not possibly have expected an invader. He reached the crossroads, rained ammunition down the right-hand corridor, and continued his charge against the desperate wishes of his aging body. Lorraine had muttered something about a special weapons storage facility next to the curve in the path, and McCormick was keen to find a weapon that would speed up his job. He pulled open the door and shot a bullet into the room's single occupant. McCormick tore through the wooden crates before him and scowled in disgust at the range of advanced weaponry, cluster rocket launchers, napalm mines, and a box which read, acid grenades for use on civilians. He stuffed his pockets with acid grenades for the inevitable moment his bullets would run dry, and then found a weapon that fitted his needs perfectly. The hand warhead. Ian Marshall's nifty name for a handheld weapon, the shape and size of a traditional hand grenade, but filled with NPN-8. Its warning label included, bold and capitalized, never used without a full surround of shelter, suggesting that its blast radius would reach further than it could be thrown. McCormick took two in his left hand and a third in his teeth, leaving his heavy assault rifle in the grip of 4 tied fingers. He burst back into the corridors and ran to the next crossroads, gunning down another clone as he ran to his right. 2 left turns later, having followed Shannon's instructions to perfection, he found himself one door away from the final resting place of Nathaniel Pierce's hallowed research. McCormick jerked the door open to the data servers and found a thin chamber the length of a train carriage, filled from front to back with caged hard drives and enough flickering lights to fill a disco. The heat was intense. Even the groaning fans that lined the ceiling were locked in a constant battle against the temperature of the computers. Someone opened fire from down the path. McCormick sheltered behind the open door and decided enough was enough. One of those bullets could have killed him stone dead and wiped out any chance of him fulfilling his mission. He couldn't afford to die, not when he was so close to destroying their 4th target out of 5. Are we really that close to surviving the night? I honestly thought we'd be dead before we got 3. McCormick shook his head and took a deep breath. The sooner he did this, the better. He pulled the pin on the first hand warhead and launched it to the far end of the chamber. He aimed the second at the halfway spot on the metal floor and sent the final one a distance he thought he might just survive from. He took his rifle in both hands, leapt back into the main corridor, and killed the clone who had not thought an old man could jump so fast. McCormick slammed the data door shut with half a second to spare as the hand warheads exploded. Like the sound of a sprinting giant, the thunderous explosions leapt closer and closer and sent the HPFC rocking with the force of an earthquake. McCormick was thrown against the back wall. He fell to the floor, double-checked that the impact had not broken his spine, and scrambled to his feet as floor P began to steady itself. He smiled as the gravity of his actions dawned on him. The AME files would be left to starve in cyberspace, never to be found again. And after a visit to floor B, Pierce would excuse me. And after a visit to floor B, Pierce would be naked of knowledge altogether. All McCormick needed to do was find a way out of the HPFC alive before his adrenaline ran out and he remembered how afraid he was. "He's down here," came a raging young voice. "Follow the explosions." It was a human's voice, of course, but one which McCormick did not recognize. Whoever it was, he was coming along McCormick's escape route, leaving him with a choice between running for his life or finding a good place to hide. He would lose a running race, but he remembered Shannon's words about a central power generator. It was one door away, and the best hiding place he could hope to find. McCormick stumbled through the entrance to the neighbouring room and closed the door moments before the angry soldier could storm around the corner. He switched off the lights and ran to the generator, a cylindrical casing filled with a mess of turbines and loud noises, and positioned himself behind it for his last stand. A set of loud footsteps came to a halt outside the door. McCormick's sense of adventure began to falter, and he finally admitted that he was alone in the dark, trapped and terrified. "You're finished, you sad coffin dodger," came a scream. "Come out and get yourself a peaceful death before I come in there and make it slow." An all-or-nothing strike had felt like such a good idea at the time. But there was no way out for McCormick anymore. His rational mathematician's mind had kept him from panic for just long enough to reach for his radio. It was time to play his last, most desperate move. "Kate," he yelled, "the code to the detonator is 192337. Remember the detonator he gave Kate just before the showdown? The thing never to be used unless the situation became desperate. He scrambled for the acid grenades in his pockets, laid them on top of the generator, and began to pull pins. After he had finished, he ran to cower in the furthest corner of the room. "McCormick," came Kate's quivering voice. 192337. Set it off at exactly 10:30, no questions asked, and phone comms the moment you've done it. And if I don't get out of this, I love all 3 of you so much." No. The door was booted open.
Not ready for the next part.
The door was booted open to reveal the soldier's silhouette, and he pointed his rifle straight at McCormick's face. With tears falling from his eyes, McCormick spoke his final words into the radio. "They got me, but the data server's gone. You know what you need to do. 192337 at 10:30. Win this war, my friends." The human switched on the light. He was younger than McCormick had imagined. He signalled for McCormick to drop his assault rifle and radio, an order which he obeyed. The assassin shot the radio to the sound of Kate's screams, breathed into backup command, but his voice was lost in the following explosions. The 3 acid grenades spilled their fizzling payload over the hull of the generator. Before his captor knew what had happened, the room around them, the whole of Floor P, and the entire citadel were plunged into darkness. Bonus points, McCormick whispered to himself. In the dark, it was easier for him to imagine the scene across the rest of New London. Everything from their munitions factories to their clone training facilities would have shut down in an instant. The vehicle ports they had entered through would only have been lit by the dim sky outside. Clones in computer rooms might have watched their screens go blank a split second before the light bulbs followed. High-ranking human officers on Floor A would have felt under threat for the first time in a year. The fizzling noises stopped at McCormick's side. The acid had burnt itself out. You know, the boy hissed, coming into view again as he flicked the switch on his rifle torch. I was going to kill you, Doctor. I was going to spread the guts of the great Joseph McCormick all across this room and stick your miserable head on the spike of an electric fence for all your pansy friends to see. I'm sure you'll get your chance. You're damn right I will. No, make no mistake, you old fart. The only reason you're still breathing is that code I heard you mention. I want answers. Of course that's why I'm alive, McCormick thought. Why do you think I shouted it loud enough for you to hear? He is smart. An angry voice yelled through the soldier's battery-powered radio. Oliver, the whole of Floor A just lost its electricity. What the hell's going on? Good news and bad news, Nick. The data servers and the power room have gone to hardware heaven. But I've got you a prize that will make it more than worth it. You killed McCormick. McCormick took the optimism in Nicholas Grant's voice as a huge compliment. Not yet. He was shouting a code into his radio for some kind of detonator. He doesn't get to die until I know what it means. Outstanding. Bring him to me so I can extract the answers myself. The assassin gasped in fury, like a child denied a packet of sweets. Yes, sir, the boy snarled. We'll be there in 10. Grant called him Oliver, and when the lights were on, I noticed he was a young redhead. The others are in grave danger, and they don't even know it. With the assassin's rifle barrel pointed to his face, McCormick raised his arms and let out a surprised gasp. You're Oliver Roth, he breathed. The boy nodded. Alive and well. End of chapter 22.
That was a great twist of that event. It's just amazing how you've done that.
Thank you.
From one moment where you're thinking, oh, he's going to die and this is the end, to, yeah, it's amazing.
We have this much left of the book and one more chapter for tonight. I mean, I could in theory read two, but well, the cliffhanger at the end, 2 chapters from now, just wouldn't be fair to end on, and also the other chapters are shorter as well. So one more chapter, and then let's talk about the special events in December to finish it off.
Done. Perfect. Let's do that.
Okay, so 12 pages. Chapter 23. In one short radio conversation, Ewan had lost 5 years' worth of behavior management lessons. He screamed and swore at the top of his voice, not caring how many clones heard and came running, thrusting his assault rifle through every window he passed in the darkness. He hit the tears away from his face instead of wiping them, and kicked against the walls as if trying to tear New London to the ground piece by piece. He had wasted his second-to-last clip of ammunition on a dead clone, who lay at his feet with 8 handgun bullets to his chest. What the hell just happened? Shouted Alex through the radio. What the hell do you think? Ewan spat in response. McCormick took out the backup place and died anyway. He came to New London to babysitters and got himself bloody killed. The words sounded unbelievable, even though they came from his own mouth. The great Joseph McCormick, father of the Underdogs and head of Britain's last army, and Ewan's surrogate grandfather, was almost certain to be dead. It felt so wrong, the thought of outliving McCormick. He was supposed to survive the longest. He deserved to. Out of the 1,000 thoughts that raced through Ewan's head, there was one that made him inconsolably guilty. The hope that McCormick really had died rather than get himself captured. If Grant made McCormick talk, the war was over. The corridor around him was pitch black. How McCormick had thought a power cut would help them to reach floor B, he would never know. He had been halfway to a stairwell up to floor D when the lights had gone out and rendered the map in his head useless. I shouldn't have left him alone, Kate wailed through the radio. It's my fault. This all happened because of me. Ewan wanted to tell her she was right. He wanted Kate to blame herself, but he knew it was only to reduce his own guilt. Besides, he only had 3/4 of his team left, and one way or another, a computer still needed destroying. Kate, he snarled reluctantly, you left him so you could kill a border point and buy us more time. If you'd stayed with McCormick, we'd have lost the war already. There was no response through the radio, except the faint crackle of sobbing. I just wish we could push the reset button. Go back to before he collapsed and do things differently? Ewan shivered. His mental collapse at Spitfire's rise felt like a month ago. Well, to us, it must have been nearly a year ago, but... We screwed up the whole week, Kate wailed. Raj is dead, Alex has been cloned, Lorraine's almost worked herself to death, and now we've lost McCormick. And unless we get to floor B, it'll all be for nothing. All the more reason to get up there and finish this, came Alex's voice, both through the radio and somewhere in the audible distance. He was close. By all rights, we should be dead by now. And if Raj were here, he'd say there's a God-given reason why we're still alive. Let's prove him right, okay? Alex, Ewan called out across the corridor. Stumbling noises came from a small distance away, and they spent the next 30 seconds ignoring Kate's cries and bringing themselves towards each other, using their voices to navigate through the dark. Good to see you again, mate, said Alex once he came close. Alex, you can't even see me. Alex dared to laugh and tried to pat Ewan on the shoulder. Instead, he hit Ewan's head. Missing your helmet? Lost it in the experiment chamber. Traded it for a gas mask. Huh, well done. Whereabouts is Kit? Alex was interrupted by a message that echoed through every radio in the Citadel, including the bodies spread across their floor E corridor. Calling all soldiers, said Ian Marshall. There's a special guard priority in place for the next 15 minutes along the stairwell from 58P to from 58F to 58P. All nearby units must abandon their posts and guard all stairwell entrances and exits. That's 58F to 58P. Do so now. Alex let out a delighted laugh. McCormick's alive. That's a pretty bloody quick conclusion to jump to. No, think about it. What's so special about floors F and P? The stairwells go to F, and McCormick was captured on P. It sounded realistic enough. Ewan nodded, although Alex would not see it in the dark. And if you don't believe me, Alex finished, call Lorraine and Shannon. I bet stairwell 58 is right next to that place he was attacking. He's being taken up to the big guns, probably because of Kate's detonator. McCormick, helpless, unarmed, and exhausted after the long climb, was half a story away from floor F. His only consolation had been enjoyment at keeping Oliver Roth behind him like a car stuck behind a tractor. At the top of the stairwell, waiting for the prisoner who had led a war against them for a year, wiped out every scrap of AME research, and reduced New London to torchlight, stood Ian Marshall and Nathaniel Pierce. Their faces were difficult to read in the shallow light beams, but they weren't happy. Back in the days of television, McCormick had seen Marshall and Pierce on the news once or twice. Not quite as often as Nicholas Grant, but he still remembered what they had looked like with their posh suits and professional haircuts. The casual clothes and bitter scowls had not been part of their on-screen personas. This is him? Sneered Marshall. Yeah, answered Roth. Disappointing, right? McCormick wasn't insulted. He knew what he looked like. But it was quite a compliment that they had expected him to be something more. Don't underestimate him, said Pierce. Before he takes one more step towards floor B, he is getting a full search. Volunteering, are you? You're performing the search, sunshine, Marshall growled towards Roth with fierce eyes, because this is your fault. If you'd got to him 3 seconds earlier, you'd have saved the Citadel's power, and we could have just marched him through the X-ray on floor D. Cover every millimetre from head to toe, because there's no way he's coming to my office without a full search for weapons. Your office? Laughed Roth. The one with the computer he's trying to destroy? Trust me, there's a plan. You know about the bomb, don't you? Roth threw a glare towards his prisoner. McCormick could not see it in the darkness, but he felt it. Actually, yeah, Roth answered. I believe it was me who called it in. McCormick held his firmest poker face, amused that he had been right. The people at the top of Grant's empire really did hate each other. He had predicted as much. Power-hungry people never truly liked their colleagues. Good, finished Marshall. Now, McCormick, there's a spare storage room over there. Would you kindly go inside and strip down? The exhausted McCormick ambled away towards the spare room, Roth's assault rifle poking his back. He walked inside, and Roth closed the door behind him rather than follow. It always made McCormick smile how people assumed they could not be heard on the other side of a closed door, especially with people of Roth's level of overconfidence. You mentioned a plan, he asked. One that involves moving a live prisoner to Ian's office? Nick's orders, answered Marshall's voice. Until we know where the bomb is, he doesn't want to spread out. Will be one big target. That's right, one big target right next to a man who knows exactly where the bomb is. My office is almost certainly outside the blast radius, but if it's not, we'll wait for McCormick to start sweating. Then we'll evacuate to the other end of the Citadel and get someone to find and defuse it. You don't get it, Ian. Tonight I saw that man storm his way through the HPFC, blowing up rooms and slaughtering clones, and even when I had him at gunpoint, he kept talking over his radio. This guy's not afraid to die. Everyone's afraid to die, Oliver, laughed Pierce. Even you. Some people love victory more than their own lives. I give you my word. If that man had to choose between survival and victory, he'd choose victory. That's not admiration in his voice, is it? And he'd still be afraid, and it'd still show, finished Marshall. You don't survive as a face-to-face arms dealer without learning how to read people, my boy. Now go, your prisoner's waiting. McCormick heard the sound of Roth's assault rifle clattering to the floor, almost as if it had been thrown down in frustration. Then the door opened, and Roth readied his hands for work. Oliver Roth and Joseph McCormick, two titans of the Great British Civil War, found themselves alone in a small room lit with the glow of two portable lights. And for the first time that evening, McCormick was able to take a proper look at the assassin without the distraction of a firearm being pointed at his face. The 14-year-old boy in front of him looked just like that, a 14-year-old boy, except in military uniform. There was even a handsomeness to Oliver Roth that McCormick had not imagined before meeting him. An endearing spread of freckles and a rusty, deepened shade of red in his hair, the type of shade that protected boys from ginger jokes and gave them Norse warrior-like appeal once they grew up. McCormick also noticed a keen, inquisitive default expression on the boy's face, as if once upon a time he had been enthusiastic about learning for learning's sake, and a pair of eyes beneath stern eyebrows that held an expression of confidence usually reserved for those wiser than their years. McCormick had seen the same expressions, mannerisms, and character in several young people he had once known and loved, teenagers who had never been corrupted like the person before him. In another world, a world inhabited by fewer negative role models, Oliver Roth could have made a fine young man. McCormick interlocked his fingers behind the back of his head and failed to suppress his nervous hiccups. Clothes off, commanded Roth. Down to your underwear. You're not afraid of seeing an old man's body? I've seen messier sights. And this is your own fault, you know. You could have just wandered through a friendly X-ray machine like one of those old airport scanners, and then been on your way. But now you're getting humiliated. McCormick checked his watch as he removed it. It was almost 10:05. I only need to go 25 minutes without breaking and telling them. I can do this. McCormick took off his helmet, then began to remove his clothes. Layer by layer, he shivered a little more, and item by item, the expression on Roth's face grew more and more disgusted. Clothes disguised a lot, and McCormick must have looked surprisingly fat. What the hell happened to your stomach? Roth barked as McCormick reached his underwear. McCormick glanced downwards at the cauterized wounds across his abdomen. The cyst that had kept him out of combat was gone forever, but the procedure hadn't been without cost. Third-degree burns were spread across his body, like a scale model of the Grand Canyon made from human flesh. Let's just say I've had a very difficult life lately, he said with a pensive voice, especially these last few years. Well, it's not far from over now. McCormick sealed his eyes shut as Roth poked around his feet and gradually up his shins. So, besides the obvious, Roth continued, what's made your life so tough? Did your cat die or something? No, my wife. I thought you'd know that with Grant's background research. I'm only interested in my enemies once I've killed them. That's a shame, replied McCormick, daring to smile. We're an interesting bunch. But to answer your question, when you get to my age, your whole generation starts to fall apart. They're the unlucky ones who get cancer in their 40s, followed by those with unhealthy lifestyles who barely make it past 60. By then, you start wondering whether you'll be the next to go, or whether you'll have the pleasure of living the longest. The best case scenario is living long enough to watch all your friends drop off the perch before you. Well, at least now your friends get to die younger, said Roth with a savage grin. What's the youngest, 15? 13. A boy called Callum. Ran out of insulin within a week of surviving takeover day. Survival of the fittest, mate. McCormick shuddered as Roth's fingers pushed into the gaps between his ribs, as if expecting to find a hidden clip of bullets. There comes a day for most of us when the funerals start to outnumber the weddings, McCormick continued. But if you look to the younger generation, the world always feels alive. It wasn't what I planned on when I set out to build people up to be the best they can be, but it's a happy side effect. I tried to guide those who needed guiding. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but it was always worth it, and it was always the right thing to do. I may not have had the easiest life, but I've lived it well. As Roth laid his fingers around the base of McCormick's neck, their eyes met. And what about you, Oliver? Where do you see your life going after this war? Roth spat a laugh and took a defensive step backwards. Oh, no. You're not using your magical love powers on me. 8 of your friends were murdered by these hands. You, of all people, should know I'm unreachable. Nobody's unreachable, McCormick answered. You wouldn't believe the kind of people I've had the honour of turning round. The world is full of young people who think their futures are already decided, that they're supposed to be this kind of screw-up or that kind of failure, just because they've been told to believe it by the people around them. But once they've had someone tell them the truth, the realization can literally be life-changing. And what is that truth? That even though we don't get to decide what happens to us, we do get to choose how we respond. And even if people tell you your future is predestined, you have more control over your personality than you think. McCormick was expecting Oliver Roth to laugh. He wouldn't even have minded. He was sure to go through worse that night. But instead, the teenager gave a curious nod. Perhaps his prisoner was offering him conversation that Grant, Marshall, and Pierce could never hope to provide. "Is that what you've been telling your retard army?" asked Roth. "Was it you who turned Ewan West from a school-hopping, violent-minded moron to the sweet little do-gooder who thinks he killed me? Hey, you leave Ewan alone. He's a good lad." Roth gave a confused face, as if wondering whether this laugh will fall silent. McCormick smirked, aware that he'd just tried to break up the war's bitterest rivalry with a fatherly voice of reason, as if it were a playground argument between two young children. "Whatever," said Roth. "Let's be honest here. You don't seriously believe people like me, the kind of guy you pray your kids don't turn into, can be turned by anything you say? Do you honestly believe bad people can turn good?" "Why not? It's as easy as good people turning bad." Roth smiled, a reaction McCormick did not expect. "It's far easier for someone to turn bad than turn good," said Roth. "It's human nature. We're all crap people deep down." "That's just your own experience with corrupted people." "No, it's my experience with humans. No one's truly good. If you don't believe me, spend half an hour in rush hour traffic and watch how people act. Or even better, put 1,000,000 of them in a giant walled prison and see what they're like a year later." McCormick looked to the floor, unable and unwilling to hide the sadness in his face. It was difficult to argue against Oliver Roth, even taking his own helplessness out of the equation. His sadness appeared to spread to Oliver Roth. When the teenager spoke again, he spoke in a somber voice. "1 second, he muttered. "I just need to do your face and then we're done." Roth took a step forward, and only then did McCormick realise how long had passed in conversation. For much of their time together, Roth had not even been searching him. Roth started to run his fingers around McCormick's head, obviously just going through the motions rather than performing a genuine search. With the top of his body reached, McCormick knew how little time he had to complete his own personal mission. "All those youngsters from difficult backgrounds who I've helped over the years," he said. "Most of them had something in common. It was their expression, their eyes. Something in their brains showed in their faces. Depression, self-pity, isolation. They all held something in their eyes that other people didn't. But you know what's strange, Oliver? I don't see it in you. I see nothing negative in your face at all. Maybe you weren't affected by your background, but experience tells me that's impossible. I think you've grown used to hiding the hurt in order to look normal and can pull off Oscar-worthy performances when important people are around." McCormick held his breath. All he had done was describe the Oakenfold students' habit of masking their difficulties, but he wondered whether he had struck a hidden, vulnerable nerve with Oliver Roth. He had momentary visions of Roth losing his cool and storming outside to grab a gun and shoot him in the head. Instead, Roth did not react. He withdrew his fingers from McCormick's head, his inspection over. "Actually," came his answer, "my upbringing was fine. Boring, actually. No hidden childhood abuse, no teenage depression, nothing. I had a good education, I was the smartest guy in school, and had a nice, secure family life. But thanks for assuming I'm some kind of screw-up who went off the rails. A few minutes ago, you were boasting about how many of my friends you'd killed. But let's ignore that for now." "You say you had an average upbringing," McCormick answered, "but something has always been missing from your life. You've never placed your trust in people, have you?" Roth could have sent McCormick's nose through the back of his head. Instead, he maintained eye contact and had a worried expression on his face. "You may never have been abused, Oliver, but you weren't loved either. That's why you don't have the expression I was talking about. It's not carefully hidden fear. It's nothing." McCormick imagined that Roth had spent very little of his life in tears, of pain or joy. The teenager would not know how to deal with the sudden tightening of his throat or the rippling of his exhaling lungs. "I'm the leader of this boy's arch-enemies, and in one conversation, I must have offered him more compassion than any of the men he fights for." "You taught yourself that look of indifference," McCormick continued, "and you kept yourself cold and emotionless until you didn't know anything different. But there's help out there. You just need to start hanging with the right crowd." The portable lamps on the floor began to dim. There would not be much more time for conversation. "You must think I'm a terrible person," Roth muttered. "Terrible does not mean unreachable, Oliver. The only thing that could ever make you unreachable is your own choice to never be reached." Roth looked away from McCormick as if he had been staring into the sun. McCormick was surprised when his captor picked up his shirt and trousers off the floor and offered them back to him. He'd imagined being led to floor be in his underwear, but perhaps this was Roth's way of showing sympathy or respect. "You can put these back on if you like," said Roth. "We're ready." Oh yeah, and they, I don't think he wrote it here, but they definitely checked the pockets.
Okay.
McCormick slipped on his shirt and trousers in turn, and when he looked up again, he saw Ross' fingers on the door handle. "You're a fine man, McCormick," he said. "One of the best I've ever known. But if you tell anyone I said that, I'll gut you myself." McCormick laughed, as if his caps were joking, and followed him back to Marshall and Pierce. End of chapter 23.
I like this.
Mm.
This is a really good chapter.
Thank you. So here we go. That's the end of it until hopefully next month, where we burn through the final 5 chapters and see who makes it out at the end.
Yes, that sounds great, actually. What dates or time would you prefer for the
Well,
next
let's
set?
take a look at the remains of my 2024 calendar.
I cannot.
So,
Year's almost ending.
how about Wednesday, 18th of December?
Let's
Because
see.
we normally do the fourth Wednesday of the month, but the fourth Wednesday of December is the 25th, and it might be busy that day.
That makes sense. Okay. We can definitely do the 18th, I believe.
Okay.
In case something changes, I'll let you know beforehand. But I think
Okay.
18th we will start with boasting about it so that we have a
Mhm.
greater audience for that time.
Yeah.
And
Grand final showdown, the finale of Tooth and Nail,
yes.
which for a long, long time, Underdogs Tooth and Nail was my favorite book of it. Favorite story I'd ever written. But then I wrote Acceleration. But
Does that happen?
I do.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You can continue.
No, sorry. It's just saying that for a long time, I didn't start work on book 3 because the ending to book 2 was just so neat for me. It kind of did everything I wanted. And that is as much as I'm saying about the ending to book 2. You're just going to have to tune in next month and find out.
I feel like that's a little bit of a spoiler, though.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you're saying that you wanted the ending to be that way and was pretty neat for you. So that
Well,
does
neat doesn't necessarily mean, well, I mean neat in a narrative sense rather than everyone lives happily ever after.
okay.
Neat is
Okay, yeah,
different.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. There's a I'm trying to think of an example without providing a massive spoiler. But anyway, pick any movie that you've watched where the main character dies at the end, but the ending of the film seems satisfactory anyway. That could be a neat ending. Also,
Oh,
think of a film where actually not a single character dies and the ending just feels satisfactory. That's what I mean by a neat ending. It just kind of fits.
got it.
So yeah, so no, there's no spoilers.
Okay, I am really looking forward to it. But my question, so I had a question. You said that you know another book became your favorite, right? Does that happen quite often? Like when you start writing a different book, does that become your favorite book or
Not
not?
really. So first draft of Tooth and Nail was written in 2010, 2011, and
Mhm.
it was basically the best non-Sonic the Hedgehog thing that I'd ever written. And as I adapted it as it went on, it was clearly just my best work. But by the time Acceleration started, well, 2 things to say about it actually. First off, it's been quite a few years since I'd written the first draft to anything Underdogs related, so I was a better and more experienced writer. But it took me a while for Acceleration to overtake Tooth and Nail in my mind for 2 reasons. Firstly, because of my, well, again, avoiding spoilers, but it's a braver story.
Oh, oh,
It
that
does a lot more things, and some of the narrative choices are things that I might not really have. Okay, I was about to say "Once I've had the guts to do." Well, you've read Underdogs 1, and the first like 90% of Underdogs 2. You know that having the guts to write stuff is something that I'm completely fine with. But it's having the ability to write particular plot twists in ways that I felt was worthy of the story. But that's as much as I can say. You're just going to have to wait until we finish reading Acceleration for me to tell you what specifically makes him a favourite. But the other reason why it took so long to overtake Tooth and Nail was because it's Tooth and Nail. It's like I love this story, but
I love it too.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Right, so anything else before we finish?
No, I feel like this was a good end, and I am looking forward to the next 5 chapters, the grand finale.
5 chapters in one go, because trust me, if I'd read another one, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah,
I think 5 is the most.
It would be really hard to wait after reading another chapter and like knowing what's coming.
Yeah, exactly, and also, frankly, some of the chapters are fairly short as well. They, but it's nice to have 5 chapters in the same session, which I don't believe we've had before.
I don't think so either. I think it was the maximum we've done is 4 chapters.
Yeah, we did 4 for the final showdown of book 1.
So this is going to be great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time
and
reading us this wonderful evening.
Okay, and thank you. And so, assuming everything goes to plan, see you on the 18th.
See you on the 18th. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And in case anybody has any questions later on when they see this, please do let us know and we'll try and answer those. See you all on the 18th.